All right. Well, Nick, I think we're a couple minutes past the start now. If we want to go ahead and kick things off.
Absolutely. Well, welcome to the Q4 Sifted live demo. We are going to do obviously introductions. We're going to do a quick industry update, go through a few slides from some of the things that we are seeing that's going on here, and well as some big things that are starting to come in 2026. Will is then going to talk a little bit about the sifted solution along with myself, and then we'll actually jump into the demo and talk about how we help our clients with the mitigation around GRI and all of the information that does come from our tool. And then, like we just mentioned a few seconds ago, we'll save some time for Q&A at the end. So again, if you look at the bottom of the meet, there is a Q&A box. So if you do have any questions, please feel free to drop them in there. But we will get started. Oh, Nick Giuliani. I'm the Director of Business Development and Partnerships here with Sifted. Been in the industry, oh my, almost 20 years in logistics. Spent a lot of time in the parcel world. So excited to be here.
Yeah. And hey, everyone, my name is Will Green. I head up our solutions engineering team over here at Sifted. I work a lot with, shippers and logistics providers of all sizes, to really understand, kind of what their parcel network looks like today and how we can best leverage software solutions on the Sifted side to address any, business goals, challenges, or pain points to be dealing with.
Will's the best, is what he was just saying there in that intro. Well, let's start with let's this. I mean, the amount of changes and the things that get thrown at our clients in today is just insane. I mean, I think we were adding it up. There was 15, 16, 17 changes from the carriers that are affecting our clients and our shippers throughout just 2025 alone. That doesn't take into account anything last year. And so with all of these changes and peak season, being in the mix and everyone starting to plan for 2026, and it's like, well, what are all these changes going to mean for me? What is this general rate increase going to ultimately do for my budgets and my profits? And that's ultimately what we're here to talk about today. But I think the amount of things that just get thrown at our clients can be overwhelming. And so I think it'll be a good topic of conversation just to better understand all of those things.
Yeah,
Uh,
100%. And GRI is definitely a big component of
yeah.
that, right? It seems simple on the front end when they just say they're gonna be raising rates by 5.9%, but there's a lot of complexity that lies behind it.
So much, yeah. I mean, at least in the conversations that we've had, when this all kind of launched, FedEx made their announcement a couple of weeks ago, UPS just made theirs. And as we've started to have some of these conversations, you realize it is so much more complex than 5.9. It might say that across all of their clients, and then you start digging in and you're like, okay, we're 5.9 here, 6.1 here. I saw one as high as 17% on a very specific mode yesterday, and how that's going to affect that. Do you change the way you're shipping in that mode? Do you change that, specific service type? Like there's so much complexity, and we're obviously going to get into it in the demo, but it almost becomes very difficult to just say, hey, let's just throw 5.9 on and that's what we're going to pay. If that's not accurate, that could really hurt a business.
Yeah, and to really add to the complication there, as Nick mentioned, there's been, over a dozen new changes to the rates just from these two, FedEx and UPS, the major carriers that we see. You know, a really prominent one is they've changed how they classify additional handling surcharges, for instance, and they increased those rates, in the middle of the year in 2025. And so you're not accounting for those changes when you look at this 5.9% increase, across GRI. So there's other elements that need to be factored into the consideration when you're looking to understand what your shipping costs are going to be in 2026 and beyond. There's a lot more under the hood than just saying, hey, it's going to be going up by 5.9% on a, package per package basis. I think that's where we really kind of start getting into the tools and solutions that we have to go through.
Well, and I think the scary part about all of this is like while you're dealing with all these carrier changes, now you're planning for 2026 to say, how did all of those things affect me? How is this, general rate increase going to affect me in 26? On top of that, you still have to be able to address all the other, questions and everything else that's affecting your business. And it's like, unless you can really start to dig in and understand the data, it's like it's almost becomes impossible as a shipper to be able to answer these questions as simple as just like what did we actually spend, let alone like digging into that spend and how did the accessorials affect us, and how are service types affecting us, and how are these changes now going to put us in a position where if we don't get out in front of them, all of a sudden we're going to be in a really bad position potentially. So it can be overwhelming at times if you don't feel like you can get your arms wrapped around the data, which is something that I hear on a lot of conversations is I got to get my arms wrapped around this data because there's no way I can answer even a few of these questions, let alone all of them, if my executive team comes and asks.
Yeah, 100%. And so I think that's where we really start to get into this with the solutions we offer over here at Sifted to kind of help simplify that large, mess, entangled web of questions that shippers, tend to have.
100%. Yeah, I think I think it all comes down to, especially when you're thinking about your overall business health, right? It comes down to how is this going to affect our margins? How is this going to affect our client experience? Right. And so obviously for the people that utilize Sifted and that get this insight, it's not only about understanding the GRI impact and what that's going to do, but it's like, how is that going to affect us going forward? And what are the things that we can do actionably to try and mitigate some of these things?
Yeah, 100%. And so that's what we're going to be talking today as we delve into the Sifted platform is what tools, do shippers have at their fingertips to, streamline their operations and help mitigate these cost increases. And so obviously, one, forecasting the impact what that GRI is going to do to your costs, that's the core component of everything. Understanding kind of what is actually going to happen and having real data-driven metrics to see what's happening, where it's happening, identify cost drivers. That lies at the core of it. But it really goes beyond just understanding what's driving costs from a GRI perspective to identifying other areas of potential efficiencies and cost mitigations and cost savings. And we'll get into this a platform, but that's where the Sifted recommendations engine comes in. We have strategies that are not just specific to GRI, but to shippers' operations as a whole that can help them take, actual actions to mitigate cost increase and keep their business and their operations lean. And then finally, offering tools around scenario modeling so you can come into the platform and start testing out what if scenarios. Like if I was to get a better discount on a specific, new surcharge, or if I was to move one service to another, what would be the impact on my cost from decisions like that? So being able to take that full service look at, what's happened, what could I potentially do about it, and what would be the impact of making that change is the kind of the more holistic view that we aim to offer. I think from there we can just go ahead and get right into the platform. And so at the core of, what we're looking to understand here first as a shipper is what's the impact of the GRI on me and on my shipping profile. And as we were talking about before, it's not always easy to quantify those changes. It's not just as simple as saying, hey, FedEx, UPS, insert carrier name here is going to be changing their average cost by 5.9% because that's just a generic increase. It's a lot more detailed as to where they're applying those rate increases by service types and by their rate cards, and even if factoring in cost changes on accessorials and surcharges as well. And that's not even getting into the fact that some shippers have rate caps inside of their contracts that limits the potential increase, but it can play in very specific ways of how that works. And that's where our 2026 GRI Impact Analysis tool comes into play. So Sifted users can get access to this report if they're interested in it. And essentially what this will do is take all of the historical data that our platform has access to from the past 12 months and quantify the impact of the GRI specific to the details of the analysis that FedEx and UPS have released. And for people who may not be entirely familiar with Sifted, just a little background, we essentially at our core, we're a parcel intelligence tool that seeks to simplify, all the complexities and nuance around parcel analytics, parcel metrics, parcel operations. And at the core of that is we have streamlined access to pulling in invoice information for users of the platform so they can have a consolidated, reporting system, have a normalized data set all in one place, and we're using that data to, create very specific visualizations to you and your business, and that's what this GRI analysis is built off of. It's combining, real life invoice information with the announced changes from the carrier to project future cost forward, and then provide really detailed breakdowns into what is driving that cost. So I can come in here and start seeing, not just, overall that I'm seeing an average, 5.96% effective GRI, but I can see actually from an accessorial perspective, that's closer to 6.4%. So even though my freight is going up, closer to 5.8, 5.9, I'm seeing a much higher increase in my cost for my accessorials. And this tool makes it really easy to start drilling into what the biggest drivers of that change is. So across, my biggest charges like fuel, additional handling, DAS, what's really driving that cost. And then I can scroll down here and see, metric by metric, percent by percent, what my biggest impact factors are. Makes it really easy for me to identify that residential delivery is a huge driver of my 2026 cost increases. It's gone up by nearly 8.5% from 2025 versus the announced 2026 rate increases. I'm seeing my accessorials have gone up by, nearly 7%, residential loans going up by 8.5%. And yeah, to your point, it's undercutting your current state of operations. It's undercutting how you've set up your potential agreements. But having access to this information, really what the impact is, it allows for one, obviously more accurate forecasting for costs. So you can see that your volume that's going to be going to residential addresses is going to be impacted way more heavily by the GRI than something going commercial, for instance. But also it provides, just, straightforward data and metrics to work with. So as you have those conversations, either internally or with your carriers, or you're making planning decisions around how to operate your business or, work with your carrier partners, having access to data to drive those conversations so that you can reach, operational plans and reach agreements that work best for you and your partners. At the end of the day, that's what we're seeking to provide here. And then, as we were saying earlier, though, the GRI is only one, component of the changes that have been happening. And I think historically, in my experience, there's, GRI was the big thing that happened every year. Then peak season starts becoming, more and more of a beast every year. But then as time goes on, I've really seen a lot of different changes and a lot of introduced complexities, from carriers. Like they're not just introducing new charges anymore. That, adds on its own complexity, and they're not just increasing their rates anymore. They're coming in and they're redefining charges, from like how they factor in DAS, how they factor in fuel. Now they're, changing criteria for, charges like additional handling and large package. And so this is showing, just a flat, from today versus 2026, what this cost increase is going to do. But, how are things like these additional handling charge changes going to impact me? And that's the other area that, Sifted can provide a lot of value, and we're having a more automated data-driven software solution can really help understand this, because understanding the GRI impact is not enough. That's going to be additive with all these changes around, additional handling and oversize. And so Sifted also layers in that level of analytical detail as well to help shippers project those changes. So what I've pulled up here now is our large package and additional handling change calculator. Essentially, what we've done is a very similar analysis here where we've looked at historical data in which packages were billed, these charges, and then compared that to the new logic that the carriers will be implementing. UPS just announced this change along with their GRI a couple weeks ago. FedEx announced a similar change a little bit before. And so it's not an easy one to understand because they're essentially, the carriers are now adding in a volumetric criteria to how they classify additional handling in large packages. So these are already two nuanced surcharges that you can get factored into your, billing in a different ways. Like if a package crosses a certain weight threshold, or if a certain dimension of the package crosses a certain threshold, you will be charged extra for it based off of, how large that package is. Now the volume of the package is factored into the potential cost as well. And we've seen a lot of shippers, based off of, what their average box sizes are and how they package and ship their items, see a huge increase in the number of additional handling or large package charges that they're going to be incurring after these changes go into effect. And this is something, if previously you were not receiving a lot of these charges, you may not have a contract or a system or an operational process in place to help control that. You may not have, money budgeted aside for that increase in cost if, you're not aware of it. It can be a very significant change. So in this, demo example, we're seeing a huge increase in the number of packages, nearly $1.8 million annually in spend that are going to be billed just from large package alone based off the change of, this, volume threshold. And these are not um, cheap surcharges. So if your carrier agreements don't have a discount in place and you're bearing the full brunt of these cost changes, that can be a huge impact. And
I don't know
again,
about
it just
you,
I'm
Will, but
sorry, Nick.
in the recommendations piece, I mean, that's probably the number one drag. There's always been, it's always been there, but it seems to be sneaking up higher and higher with almost every client, where additional handling fees are starting to really affect our clients, and it's starting to pop up more and more in the recommendations that I'm seeing in our conversation. So it's definitely, it's already started, and it's going to keep like by, this time in January, end of January, we're going to really start to see the impact. And I think one of the things that we hear a lot from our clients is obviously they love all the analytics and they love the KPIs, but like the predictive ability that we have allows them to get out in front of these things in ways that they've never had before. And so it's just a lot of lack of visibility, trying to dig in. And so we're really trying to help them get out in front of these things before they become huge problems and kind of keep those small problems small.
Yeah, it's a great point and does kind of open up and, direct the conversation towards, what we can do from like a recommendations and more proactive view of all of this, and to kind of help, mitigate these changes, because this is just how the carriers are going to be pricing things now. This is just how they're running their business, and there's not much that, a shipper can really do about those decisions that the carrier makes outside of maybe, coming to certain agreements around specific discounts. But where our recommendations engine starts to come into play, this is a great tool that can catch, one, just these types of changes we were talking about before, but really focus on other areas as well to help drive operational efficiency. So you can find other areas that could potentially help offset these costs. Like for instance, this unauthorized oversized overmax fee. This is a lot more expensive than even additional handling or large package. We're talking about 1,500 to 2 grand per package that gets hit with these, really large bulky items that, the carriers don't necessarily want inside their network. And so being able to have a tool here that proactively lets me know whenever I ship something like this and got billed with this charge, I can then identify, okay, where did this happen? Why did this happen? I can help mitigate this from, happening again in the future, and maybe go back and have conversations with my carrier and strengthen that partnership there to say, hey, what can we do to prevent these packages coming through? And then I know, hey, like the system will say, hey, like these are packages that could potentially go via freight for another service that's more optimized for big and bulky outside of parcel. And so help, really drive those better operational changes and mitigate cost. And that's just one example of what the system is looking for, but we have over a dozen different scenarios pre-built that the tool has been programmed to look for. Everything from like specific, really costly surcharges, like address corrections, and even, service type decisions that shippers are making. So looking at things like service type optimization is, where we can start to see in the data, oh, well, like I'm sending a lot of packages via one service that could really, I could benefit from selecting a cheaper, more economical service from a cost perspective, but I can actually get the package delivered in the same amount of time. So it's not just mitigating, surcharges, it's also having the intelligence and having the tools available to make better operational decisions around how we choose to ship.
And I always think it's fun to hear the stories of people that's like, I had all this data, I had all this stuff, I just had no way to take any action around it. And so I think those people that get on boarded with us, they now have the ability to see the data. They now have the ability to see the recommendations and understand exactly where they can start taking these actionable insights. And then between the alerts and the other KPIs that we provide, they can then stay, out in front and monitor those things as they've made a lot of changes. Like, hey, if I do get hit with that kind of $100 or more package, that should never happen. I need to be notified immediately. Or if we're getting hit with specific accessorials, they can then stay out in front after they've kind of made some of those operational changes to the system, which is always fun to just hear the stories come of like all the things they were able to do to mitigate a lot of these things they just were unaware of because they've never had the ability to see it.
Yeah, and it's really a twofold problem there. It's one, how do I know what I need to change, what I need to do? And the data is there. It's having access to data isn't the problem. The other side of it though is not just how do I, know what I need to do, it's how do I actually get that information and make sense of the information to tell me what I need to do. And that's really the core of it because while the data is available, parcel data is extremely complex. You're usually talking about massive data sets, a large number of detail on all different types of charges. It really takes, a lot of understanding of not just, how to work with data, but how, parcel data specifically is structured and what are the important elements there to pay attention to. And that's really what, these tools seek to streamline and simplify is to take all that information and really just start helping you make sense of it. So, take people out of that, that spreadsheet mindset and even like we don't want to even have a system where you have to come in and check dashboards that does add efficiency to it but the ideal state here is we can get to a truly proactive system that is combing through the data on your behalf and then bringing stuff to your attention as it's happening without you having to come in here and check on a weekly or daily basis to come through all the information but having access to that detail when it's needed is obviously also important.
Yeah. Let the platform work for them. That's what we talk about all the time is how do we get the platform to work for our clients and allow them to have that proactive approach. So 100%.
Yeah, and where they can really start, users can really start to, enhance that feature set is not just through the recommendations, which are pre-built, but these tools also have the ability to come in here and start creating custom alerts, for instance. So if I have specific issues that I know I need to be paying attention to, specific data sets I need to pull, I want to keep my eyes on something, but I don't want to have to go through and comb through different, data tables and do a bunch of different exports and build a bunch of reports. This alert feature can come in here and I can just take, problems that could be simple or complex. I'll just do something like I want to keep an eye on high cost packages. So whenever I send something for more than $100, I want to be alerted to it. So I can just type in to the system, say, hey, let me know if a package costs more than $100. And then this generate button is just going to fill out this form. And it's essentially a rules engine down here where I can set, either manually or through the box above, build out some rules so you can see it set. So whenever I'm going to get a shipment that costs more than $100, but I can use different fields as well. I can drill into specific accounts, look at specific carriers, zones, look at things by recipient, destination, really a lot of variability here to build the complex logic. And then just say, hey, let me know when this is going to happen. I can create my alert. It'll show all these instances. And now this is just going to be surfaced to my inbox whenever it happens. I don't need to go and check on a recurring basis just to find out if it happened or not and see where it did. We'll generate a report and direct you to the actual packages that are being affected here.
I had a conversation with a large international retailer, and their data expert was off for a couple of weeks. They were the ones digging into all the different accessorials and different charges. Well, in those 2 weeks they were gone, they got hit with $75,000 in hazmat charges that they shouldn't have, right? And they didn't have that understanding until weeks and weeks and weeks went by. And so, like we were talking about that example with the alerts, it's like if you would have set that to say, hey, we should never get hit with this accessorial, we need to be alerted immediately, they could have mitigated that problem instead of having to deal with it 2 months down the road when they started looking at the bills and figuring out, like, what happened here? it was just very hard for them to understand. Whereas like we're trying to create that proactiveness where it gets sent right to you and you know right away when it happens and you can try to address it immediately. Keep small problems small is a conversation we have a lot, not only with our clients but our prospects too when they're starting to think about getting their arms wrapped around this operational data.
Yeah, 100%. And as we kind of start having these conversations, it always directs to, okay, so now I've got a better sense of what I'm doing today, but I need help making decisions around what to do in the future. And that's where like the what if analytics and the modeling tools that we have inside the platform can really come into play as well. And a lot of these are actually already tied into the recommendations. We're doing some on the front modeling, but I have the ability to come in here and start, looking at my data from a more future looking perspective as well, either from like a service type optimization perspective, identifying which services I could be using more or less of. We have package modeling tools that can help me forecast the impact of changing or introducing new box sizes. Network optimization is a really great tool that allows me to come in here and play with my current distribution network. I can take out and add in new distribution centers across the country and see how that impacts my cost and time in transit. I'll quickly touch on, contract modeling here as part of this demonstration. What this allows me to do is actually start comparing my current rates and current agreements against potential future changes. And so, for instance, the scenario where, hey, I've realized that this GRI is coming along, and because of the changes and additional handling in large package, I'm going to start seeing a lot more of these surcharges. So I want to start having conversations with my carrier about how we can better structure, my agreement to accommodate for those changes. We can come into this and actually model those changes out as well. And so we can start getting really specific to not just carrier announcements, but how your specific agreement plays with what the carrier is doing. And we can do this, cross carrier. The system is set up right now to support UPS, FedEx. We've made long strides to releasing Amazon as well. So we're truly creating a cross carrier tool here. And I can come in and start seeing, service by service, lane by lane, zone by zone, weight band by weight band. How much would I be paying under each scenario? And really start seeing, where am I winning? Where am I losing? How can I structure my agreements? And how can I structure, my operations for where I utilize each carrier based off of these very specific agreements? And we're not just taking into account, standard discounts and things like that. We're drilling into how's your dim factor play into all of this, min reduction, surcharges, all that stuff gets included in these models. So, very robust. It's a complicated topic, but the tool does a great job of streamlining these analyses and simplifying it. And so you can have access to this information in a lot quicker manner than having to do a more like granular manual analysis that a lot of analytics teams have to do today.
I mean, how many times have we heard, I broke my spreadsheet. I don't have, I can't even do things in Excel anymore because I've literally broken the formulas. I have too much data to try to figure this out, or the amount of manual time going into just trying to get their arms wrapped around it. So we've heard so
Yeah.
many success stories come out of like what this modeling can do. It's always fun to hear, to see the impact, not only from a cost perspective, but an overall business impact. It's always fun to hear those stories.
Yeah, 100. Yeah, it's again, the problem isn't there's no access to data. It's there's too much data. It's breaking my existing tools. I don't have good access to the data that's out there. And so really that's a huge component of the value here is just having tools that are built to work specifically with the data that you need that's important and that are built to help streamline visibility into what's actually impactful in those massive data sets. Great. So I think we're getting close to time here. Switch back over now. Wanted to leave a few moments at the end here for a Q&A session as we wrap up. But again, just to kind of summarize here, the intent was just to showcase how, through software we can not just understand changes to our networks and how carrier announcements are going to be changing our cost profiles, but how we can actually identify ways to mitigate those changes and what we can do about it and evaluate future what if scenarios as well.